Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Gabriel Byrne, and I'm really honoured to be here tonight in Santa Fe to introduce one of Ireland's greatest writers. And I'm proud to say that he's also a friend of mine. And Colum, although he's recognized worldwide as one of the preeminent writers of his day, he is an Irish writer. He's also a chameleon in the sense that you never quite know what he's going to do, next. The generation of writers that preceded him, people like John McGahern and Edna O'Brien, and before them Frank O'Connor and Sean O'Whelan, Colum was one of the first to leave Ireland and to forge out a career for himself as a novelist who dealt not just with Irish themes. Some people would say that the Irish novel had become very introverted from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. It was people like Edna O'Brien, for example, who moved out but still wrote about Ireland. Colum was the first one to move out, retain his Irishness, and still become a universal writer. His themes are, he can go from writing about Russia to a novel like Transatlantic, to Let the Great World Spin, and to the fabulous book of short stories that he wrote called 13 Ways of Looking. We are in Ireland very, very proud of him, and the days when Ireland begrudged the success of its writers is kind of, I think, beginning to wane. And Colum has been weighed down with prizes and awards and so I couldn't even begin to. I think he even won a turkey at the local Christmas raffle. He's won everything. Anyway, it's a great honor for me to introduce a great writer and a great friend, Colum McCann.
He says to me on the way out, "Get up, you bollocks, yeah." Gabriel Byrne, preeminent Irish actor, Irishman, patriot, artist, writer, great friend. What an honor it is to spend any time with him, and to be introduced by him is fantastic. To be here is an honor for both of us. Young writer, has the passion of our calling been robbed from us? It often seems that the crisis of our age is that we are living in stunned submission to the circumstances of the times, the rule of politicians and bureaucrats and hedge fund managers and others in their closed-necked shirts. We are being bought off by our affair with the contemporary drug of choice, ease. At the same time, twisted social outrages are unfolding at our feet. Political parties, they talk about building walls. Universities invest in fossil fuels. Corporations celebrate themselves while pyres burn. The problem with so much of our reality is that it operates from a flat surface, a screen, and it does not address itself to the contoured world that we actually live in. So, get off the couch, get out the door, onto the page. All of this is useless if it's just a pep talk. Your words are not a consolation prize. Justify your rage. Take pleasure in the recklessness of your own imagination. So much writing nowadays seems to suffer from a reduced moral authority, not just in the minds of the readers, but in the minds and indeed the language of the writers ourselves. Writing is no longer part of our national idea. We don't look to our authors in the way we did decades ago. Nobody fears what we have to say. And why is that? We have allowed the voices to be devalued, our voices to be devalued in favor of comfort. Our moral compass is off kilter. We have given in to the tendency to be neutralized. We live in a culture where increasingly we are mapped. We have GPS'd ourselves to death. We have forgotten how to get properly lost. This is not, I hope, some bleeding heart simplicity, nor should your response to it be, young writer. So embrace the challenge. Never forget that writing is the freedom to articulate yourself against power. It is a form of non-violent engagement and civil disobedience. You have to stand outside society, beyond coercion, intimidation, cruelty, duress. Where power wants to simplify, you should complicate. Where power wants to moralize, you should criticize. Where power wants to intimidate, embrace. The amazing thing about good writing is that it can find the pulse of the wound without actually having to inflict the violence. It is a way of recognizing the hurt without praising it or suffering it. Writing allows the illusion of pain, while forcing us to grow up and recognize our own demons. We touch the electricity of suffering, but we can eventually recover. We carry the scars, but that's what they are, scars. We have to understand that language is power, no matter how often power tries to strip us of language. You want to know your enemy? Read their books. Watch their plays. Examine their poetry. Try to get to the heart of them. The grievance you know is so much better than the unknown. The impulse to change comes from encountering the multiple and complex shades of the world. Be aware of what you are writing against. Stand up. Against war, against greed, against walls, against simplicity, against shallow ignorance. The fool should speak the truth, even when, or maybe especially when, it's unpopular. Don't be embarrassed. Don't give up. Don't be cowed into silence. Stand on the outside. Become more dangerous. Have people fear your bite. Restore that which has been devalued by others. Don't let the passion of your calling be ridiculed. Raise your voice on behalf of those who've been drowned out. Don't allow the begrudgers to render you useless. Value the cynic. Yes, praise him even. He is useful. He is still one you can teach. Don't back away from engagement. You must talk about the grime and the poverty and the injustice and the 1,000 other everyday torments. You must speak of life no matter how bitter or lacerating. Our writing is a living portrait of ourselves. Good sentences have the ability to shock, seduce, and drag us all out of our stupor. Be what a diamond is to glass. Scrape your way across. Transform what has been seen. Imagine the immensities of experience. Oppose the cruelties. Break the silence. Be prepared to risk yourself. Find radiance. Ready yourself for scorn. Embrace difficulty. Work hard. Face it, you're not going to write a masterpiece before breakfast. Your song will exact a price. Be prepared to pay. Write, young writer, write. Claim your proper future. Find the language, write for the sheer pleasure we take in doing it, but also for the knowledge that it might just shift this world of ours a little bit. It is, after all, a beautiful and strange and furious place. Literature reminds us that life is not already written down. There are still infinite possibilities. Make from your confrontation with despair a tiny little margin of beauty. The more you choose to see, the more you will see, and in the end, the only things worth doing are the things that might possibly break your heart. Rage on. Thank you. Thank you. That's from Letters to a Young Writer. It is an extraordinary town, Santa Fe, and an extraordinary organization. I am delighted to be invited here. I was here last year with Terry Tempest Williams, and we went to a detention center, and we went to the Santa Fe Community College. I believe there's some students here. Are there? Shout out. The outreach programs, the way that literature is allowed to become part of the community. It's something that I think I wish every town in Ireland, England, the United States, and everywhere else were a part of what you were doing here, and indeed around the world. So congrats to everybody, and thank you to everybody at the Lannan Foundation. Now for something a little rude. This is from a novel called Dancer. And my mother, when she read this section, she had 2 words for me. She just said, "Och, Colum." You'll see why. It's a novel that fictionalizes the life of Rudolf Nureyev. This is a friend of Rudolf Nureyev's, Victor Perishi, sort of a made-up character based on a guy called Victor Hugo. It's New York, it's 1975. It's 40 pages without a full stop. I promise you I'm only going to read the first 2.5. I used to have it off by heart, but I wrote it a long time ago. So, New York, 1975. It is one of those heartless streets you find in parts of the city where the light is still tense with yesterday's darkness, and even in the late afternoon, it already feels like curfew, and the spent trash of the day goes skidding along, and the pigeons sit grey on the chain-link fences, and the traffic is stalled and fume-blowing, and the storefronts are dark and shadowy with filth and grime. 11th Street and C, Lower East, all smack and suicide. But Victor breaks it simply by moving down the sidewalk, making walking into a sort of dancing, beginning in the shoulders with a symmetrical roll that not even the blacks have perfected. One oblong shrug of a shoulder and then the other, as if connected by synaptical cogs. First the left and then the right, but not just the shoulders. The roll moves down into his chest, into his rib cage, through the rest of his body, down to his toes. God made me short so I could blow basketball players without ruining my knees. Then up again to rest for a moment in his hips. Nothing flagrant, no need to bring attention. The walk alone pays homage to his crotch. So if you're sitting on a brownstone stoop, high or hungover or both, you look up through the shit and the grime and the 1,000 other everyday torments too deep to mention, and you see Victor coming along, looking like he's the first man ever to whistle. In his tight black pants and his neon orange shirt, his black hair swept back, his teeth white underneath his dark moustache, and his body in a roll that isn't jazz or funk or foxtrot or disco. It's just pure Victor from head to toe, an art he must have managed since birth, laughing as he walks, a chuckle that rises high and ends low, a Victor laugh on impulse, like his own body has just told him a little joke about himself. And the whole day it slips away from you while you watch him. The clocks stop, the guitars tune themselves in unison, the air conditioners hum like violins, the garbage trucks, they sound like flutes. And you sit rooted to the steps as Victor waves to the other queens, hanging out the windows, wigs and feathers and lust, while he crushes a cigarette or ties a shoelace or raps on a window pane, using a silver dollar so it sounds out. And there are whistles and catcalls, Victor having become famous 6 years ago, after the '69 riots in Sheridan Square, when he was arrested for violence and nudity. Nude violence! But then managed a hand job from a tall blonde cop in the 6th Precinct station. So Victor was talked about, laughed about, cheered in the bars, baths, back rooms of the city, and he moves on in the empire of himself, taking a bow in front of the windowsills. Victor having learned every inch of the bow from his good friend Rudy Neveroff. Holding the bend, arching his back, sweeping his arm to the sky, frozen a second, grinning, then walking again in a sequence of sun and shadow down to the corner smoke shop where he hauls deep on a joint with the pretty Puerto Rican boys who polish Victor's shoes with a white bandana saying, "Man," no, while he goes inside barefoot to tell the shop owner, "Man, they should arrest the mass murderer who gave you that haircut." His own hair so thick and slick it shines under the shop neon, buying himself a packet of Lucky Strikes, his whole life a string of Lucky Strikes, from the streets of Caracas to the cockcrow of the New World, beginning as a carpenter, then a waiter, then a hustler, then a house painter, and after Stonewall, an interior designer. Yeah, I'll design your interior. taking only enough business to live the way he wants, knowing that the less a man works, the more he's paid. One of the simple rules of New York City, and Victor has over the years proved many such simple rules to himself, his favorite being that if you live your life without falling in love, you'll be loved by everyone. One of the great laws of love and fuckery. You take what you can get and you move swiftly away, no looking back, so that even the Puerto Rican boys on the stoop can't hold him after sharing half their joint. He's gone once more, brightening the next street and then the next, hailed while shimmying along, the dealers reaching into their tight yellow trousers for a couple of quaaludes free of charge, saying, "Victor, my man, you tell those blue bloods where the real stuff is at." And all the dealers hoping for Victor business later that night, since Victor business is good business. Victor might well guide a large troop to your stoop, so you can wake up tomorrow slung alongside your sweetheart with your heart singing and a fat roll of 20s under your pillow, and Victor smiles as he takes the pills, saying, "Gracias," one of the two Spanish words he uses, gracias and cojones, both of them pronounced in 3 long syllables, like he's chewing for a moment on the childhood memory of Venezuela. The filth, the dogs, the soccer balls rolling towards the sewer pipes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, Colum. I'm serious, that's what she said. It's like, but she said the same thing. She said, why didn't you write stories like you did when you wrote Fish in the Slow Black River, which was my first collection of stories. But when I wrote Fish in the Slow Black River, she said, oh, Colum. Lots of bad words in that thing, you know. She's great. I just had dinner with her. She's still in Dublin, 91 years old. She's fantastic. And she's still saying, oh, Colum. Yeah, I'll tell her that you clapped for her. That's so nice. I'd like to read to you a little bit from a novel called Let the Great World Spin. Thank you. I wrote Let the Great World Spin on the morning of September the 11th in 2001, I was in an apartment on 71st Street and First Avenue, and I heard the sirens outside the window, and my phone was ringing quite a lot, but I sort of ignored it. And then I eventually went out. My wife was there in the middle of the apartment, putting clothes on my son, John Michael, who was a very young baby at that stage. And I pressed the button on the answering machine. It was my sister in London who had heard about what had happened down at the World Trade Center. We were in the heart of New York, but we didn't yet know. We lived right by a hospital, so there were sirens all the time. And I just turned the television on over Alison's shoulder, and there was the buildings in which her father worked. He was in the first building to be hit, the second building to come down. He got out, I will tell you that. But I remember that day walking around, going down to the blood donation center and stuff, and wandering around and in a haze. But having read Paul Auster's essay about Philippe Petit's tightrope walk across the World Trade Center, and even knowing on that particular day that Petit's tightrope walk could never be replicated again, and that it was an act of creation that stood in almost perfect opposition to the act of destruction that had taken place on that particular day. It took me another 5 years to get the guts up to start to write about it, and essentially Petit's tightrope walk across the World Trade Center towers is a metaphor, I suppose, for 9/11. And one of the people in this book is a woman called Claire. She lives on Park Avenue in the 70s. I happen to be the least cool writer in the whole of New York. I actually live on the Upper East Side. It's terrible. And this is a woman who actually lives on the Upper East Side too. And I just thought I'd read this tonight. And what is happening is that she's invited over a whole load of other mothers who have lost their sons in Vietnam. She's invited them over for a coffee morning. And she's very nervous about the whole thing. And she's thinking about her son, Josh. Serve your country, Josh. If you can write a program that plays chess, then surely you can tell us how many are falling to the gooks. Give me all your ones and zeros, heroes. Show us how to count the fragged. They could hardly find uniforms small enough at the shoulders or long enough at the legs for him. He stepped onto the plane, trouser legs at half-mast. I should have known then. I should have just called him back. But on he went. The plane took off and went small against the sky. A barracks was already built out in Tan Son Nhut. At the Air Force Base, a small brass band was there to meet them, he said. Cinder block and desks of pressure-treated wood, a room full of PDP-10s and Honeywells. They walked inside and the place had hummed for them. A candy store, he said. And she wanted to tell him so much on the tarmac the day he left. The world is run by brutal men, and the surest proof is their armies. If they ask you to stand still, you should dance. If they ask you to burn the flag, wave it. If they ask you to murder, recreate. Theorem, anti-theorem, corollary, anti-corollary. Underline it twice. It's all there in the numbers. Listen to your mother. Listen to me, Joshua. Look me in the eyes. I have something to tell you. But he stood, buzz-haired and red-cheeked in front of her, and she said nothing. Say something to him. That shine to his cheeks. Say something. Tell him. Tell him. But she just smiled. Solomon pressed the Star of David into his hands and turned away and said, "Be brave." She kissed his forehead goodbye. She noticed the way the back of his uniform creased and uncreased in perfect symmetry, and she just knew, the moment she saw him go, that she was seeing him go forever. Hello, Central, give me heaven. I think my Joshua was there. I can't indulge this heart sickness. No. Spoon the coffee out and line the tea bags up. Imagine endurance. There's a logic to that. Imagine and hang on. How is it being dead, son, and would I like it? Oh, the buzzer. Oh, the spoon clanged to the floor. Oh, stepping quickly along the corridor. Return and pick up the spoon. Everything neat now? Neat now, yes. Give me back his living body, Mr. Nixon, and we will not quarrel. Take this corpse, all 52 years of it. Swap it. I won't regret it. I won't complain. Just give him back to me, all sewn up and handsome. Control yourself, Claire. I shall not fall apart. No. Quick now, doorwise, at the buzzer. Her mind, she knows, needs a quick dip in water, a momentary cold swell, like those little buckets outside a Catholic church. Dip in and be healed. Yes? Your visitors, Mrs. Soderbergh. Oh, yes, send them up. Too harsh? Too quick? I should have said wonderful, great, with a big swell to my voice, instead of send them up. Not even please, like hired hands, plumbers, decorators, soldiers. She engages the button to listen in. Curious thing, the old intercoms, faint static and buzz and some laughter and door close. The elevator straight ahead, ladies. Well, at least there's that. At least he didn't show them to the service elevator. At least they're in the warm mahogany box. Oh, no, not that. The elevator. The faint mumble of voices, all of them together. They must have met up beforehand, prearranged. I hadn't thought of that, hadn't let it cross my mind. I wish they hadn't. Talked about me, maybe. Needs a doctor, awful grey streak in her hair. Husband's a judge, wears implausible sneakers, struggles to smile, lives in a penthouse but calls it upstairs, is terribly nervous, thinks she's one of the gals, but she's really just a snob, is likely to break down. How to greet them? Handshake? Air kiss? Smile? The first time round, they had hugged goodbye, all of them in Staten Island at the doorstep, with the taxi beeping, her eyes streaked with tears, arms around one another, all of us happy, at Marcia's house, when Janet pointed to a yellow balloon caught in the treetops. Oh, let's meet again soon. And Gloria had squeezed her arm, they had touched cheeks. Our boys, you think they knew each other, Claire? You think they were friends? War. The disgusting proximity of it, its body odor, its breath on her neck all this time. 2 years now since pullout. 3, 2.5, 5 million. Does it matter? Nothing's over. The cream becomes the milk. The first star at morning is the last one at night. Did she think they were friends? Well, they could have been, Gloria. They certainly could have been. Vietnam was as good a place as any to start. Yes, indeed, Dr. King, he had a dream, and it would not be gassed on the shores of Saigon. When the good doctor was shot, she sent $1,000 and $20 bills to his church in Atlanta. Her father raved and roared, called it guilt money. She didn't care. There was plenty to be guilty for. She was modern, yes. She should have sent her whole inheritance. I like fathers. I just think everyone should disown one. Like it or not, Daddy, it goes to Dr. King, and what do you think of your niggers and your kikes now? Oh, the mezuzah on the door. Oh, I forgot about that. She touches it, stands in front of it, just tall enough to obscure it, the top of her head, the clang of the elevator. Why the shame? But it's not shame, not really, is it? What is there possibly to be ashamed of? Solomon insisted on the mezuzah years ago. That's all for his own mother, to make her comfortable when she visited, to make her happy. And what's wrong with that? It did make her happy. Isn't that enough? I have nothing to apologize for. I have scuttled around all morning with my lips puckered, afraid to breathe, swallowed a big bag of air. I should have been a pair of ragged claws. What is it the young ones say? Get a grip, hang on. Ropes and helmets and carabiners. What was it that I never said to Josh? She can see the numbers as they rise. A bustle from the elevator shaft and a loud chatter. They're comfortable already. I wish I'd met them earlier in some coffee shop. I wish, but here they are, here they come. What was it? Hello, she says. Hello, hello, hello. Marcia, Jacqueline, look at you. Come in. I love your shoes. Janet, this way, this way. Gloria, oh, hi. Oh, look, please come in. It's so lovely to see you. The only thing you need to know about war, son, is don't go. Thank you. I said to myself, if I'm going to read that, I'm going to read a funny scene. Because I have time. This is the prostitute Tilly. She's 38 years old. She lives in the Bronx. And I had a lot of fun with her. This is just a short piece in Tilly's voice. I wish I had a Bronx accent, but I don't. You're going to get Gabriel to do that. Wait till you hear him do the accents later on. I got another trick I thought I recognized. He was young, but bald on top. This is sort of like, this is like my bit of, this is me in the novel. I got another trick I thought I recognized. He was young, but bald on top. The bald spot was very white, like a little ice rink on the top of his head. He got a room in the Waldorf Astoria. The first thing he did was he pulled the curtains tight and he fell on the bed and he said, "Let's get it on." I was like, wow, do I know you, honey? He looked at me hard and said, "No." "Are you sure?" I said, all cutesy and shit. "You look familiar." "No," he said, real angry. "Hey, take a chill pill, honey." I said, "I'm only axing." So I pulled off his belt and unzipped him, and he moaned, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah," like they all do. And he closed his eyes, and he kept on moaning. And then, I don't know why, but I figured it out. It was the guy from the weather report on CBS. Except he wasn't wearing his toupee. That was his disguise. So I finished him off and got myself dressed, and I waved goodbye, he waved goodbye, but turned at the door and said to him, "Hey, man, it's cloudy in the east with the wind at 10 knots and a chance of snow." There I was, cracking myself up. Thank you. No, you don't need to clap. Last little bit from Let the Great World Spin. There's a photo on page 237 that was taken, I'm sure you can't see it, but it was taken in August 1974. Amazing, because Philippe Petit is up here in the air like a little fly person. And here are the buildings here, and there's a plane going across the sky. And it was taken by a New York Times photographer, and I attributed it to a character in the book. And this is just a little piece about that particular photograph. It's the granddaughter, in fact, of Tilly the prostitute. The chapter is called Roaring Seaward and I Go. She often wonders what it is that holds that man so high in the air. What sort of ontological glue? Up there in his haunted silhouette, a dark thing against the sky, a small stick figure in the vast expanse. The plane on the horizon, the tiny thread of rope between the edges of the buildings, the bar in his hands, the great spread of space. The photo was taken on the exact same day her mother died. It was one of the reasons she was attracted to it in the first place. The sheer fact that such beauty had occurred at the same time. She had found it yellowing and torn in a garage sale in San Francisco 4 years ago. At the bottom of a box of photographs, the world delivers its surprises. She bought it, got it framed, kept it with her as she went from hotel to hotel. A man high in the air while a plane disappears, it seems, into the edge of the building. One small scrap of history meeting a larger one, as if the walking man were somehow anticipating what would come later. The intrusion of time in history, the collision point of stories. We wait for the explosion, but it never occurs. The plane passes, the tightrope walker gets to the end of the wire. Things don't fall apart. And it strikes her as an enduring moment, a man alone against scale, still capable of myth in the face of all other evidence. Thank you. Oh, my word. Okay, now I'm really nervous because I'm going to take a gamble and I'm going to read something that I'm in the middle of and I've never read before anywhere, but this seems like the place to do it. Thank you. I decided to do an easy novel, so I took on Israel and Palestine. So that's where I've been for the past few years, and there are two amazing men who I got to meet, Rami El-Hanan, who some of you might even know, and Bassam Aramin, who are with an organization called the Parent Circle. And they go around Israel, Palestine, and indeed around the world, telling the story of their daughters. I won't give too much away. The novel is called A Paragon. If there's anybody in the audience tonight who knows what the word a paragon means, I promise you I'll buy you a drink. Does anybody know A-P-E-I-R-O-G-O-N? Does anybody know what that word means? Don't look it up in your dictionaries. Put away the smartphones. I'm too tight for that. I'm not going to buy you that. And it's not a Courvoisier I'm going to buy you either. A paragon, anyone know? No. A lamp, that's a good... No. And a paragon is a shape with a countably infinite number of sides. An ogon, like a hexagon, pentagon, but this is a paragon. And that, to me, is what Israel is. Israel and Palestine is a shape with a countably infinite number of sides. This novel has 1,000 stories in it, and this is just one section talking about Rami. And yeah, hopefully you'll get it. I'm nervous. Okay. For the first few years after the bombing, it worried Rami that he was repeating himself. He had to tell Smadar's story 2 or 3 times in one day. Once in the morning at a school, and once in the afternoon at the parents' circle. Then again at night in a synagogue or at a mosque or at a community hall. Pastors, imam, rabbis, reporters, cameramen, school kids, senators, visitors from Sweden, Mexico, Azerbaijan, the bereaved from Venezuela, Yemen, Mali, China, Indonesia, Qatar, Rwanda come to visit the holy places. On occasion, early on, before he allowed himself to be comfortable in the repetition, he found himself pausing in mid-sentence, wondering if he had said the same thing twice, or in the span of minutes. Not just a general repetition, but the exact same words in a row, the same intonation, the same facial expressions, as if somehow he had exposed the story to the mechanical, the rhythm of the everyday, that the listeners might look on him as a broken-down reel, trapped by the sameness of his grief. Afterwards, he would realize that he'd left out whole chunks of what he truly wanted to say. It flushed him with fear that he might appear fraudulent, theatrical, rehearsed. He could feel the heat rise in his face, the damp at his underarms. His palms grew sweaty. On the 2nd or 3rd telling in a day, he found himself reaching to pinch the skin on his forearms, jolt himself awake, to make sure he wasn't retreading old territory. My name is Rami El-Hanan. I am the father of Smadar. I am a 7th-generation Jerusalemite. It wasn't the content that bothered him. It was the idea that he might accidentally repeat a phrase in the same speech. He wondered how actors did it, to say the same thing meaningfully, performance after performance. How was it possible? What sort of discipline did it take twice on matinee day? How could they, in repetition, make it real? How could they keep it alive? But the more he went on, the more the story took on a singular shape. The more he began to realize that it possibly did not matter. There was, he knew, always an end to the run of an actor, but there was never an end to his. No final curtain call, no ovation, no adulation, no grand finale, no walk out the stage door, overcoat on, collar turned up, no alleyway, no streetlight, no rain falling on the cobbles, no morning review. He was a beginning without end. And he began to see that it wasn't a performance at all. There was nothing theatrical about it. He settled into the repetition. It was his blessing and his curse. He spoke to academics, to artists, to school kids, to Israelis, to Palestinians, to Americans, to Germans, whoever would listen. Sometimes he felt he was standing outside of himself. He hovered among the audience, watched himself moving on stage, but it didn't matter. He was still connected with the words. They were his. They were told for a purpose. He wanted to waken the sleep in his listeners, to see a jolt in them, just one time, even once in 1,000. It didn't matter. To see an eye open, or to see a face surprised, or even to see a crease of doubt, that was enough. That was the crack he wanted. He always talked about making a crack in the wall. The repetition didn't matter anymore. He felt himself awake, and as he spoke, he saw his daughter again, her oval face, her brown eyes, her turn to the shoulder laughter in a garden in Jerusalem with a white band in her hair, a crack in the wall. And it sometimes surprised Rami that there were occasions when he could reach so far inside that he could discover new ways of saying the same thing, or even old memories that he'd forgotten from years ago. It slid something sharp and burning into his ribcage, pried him even further open. He was, he knew, making her continually present. And once or twice, he looked across to see the surprise on Bassam's face, as if the new phrase had cut him open too. The force of the blast on Ben Yehuda Street knocked my daughter high in the air. There are times I think she may have been hitching a lift towards heaven. I can still hear the slide of the plastic rollers on that cold metal tray. Physics stole her soul. Thank you. Thank you very much.